Good evening. Right now, Metro Police are desperately searching for the person or people responsible for killing a man and a woman.
I got a male down in the middle of the street.
Breaking news now, a triple shooting leaves 2 dead.
Never expect for somebody to tell you your loved one was murdered.
This Labor Day will mark 42 years that have haunted the St. Cloud family.
30 years. 30 years this family has waited for answers.
A couple months go by, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you really start to struggle with the idea that the case might not get solved and that somebody might get away with murder.
It's very unfortunate that we have any cold cases at all, and certainly unfortunate that we have as many as we do. And that's why Ryan's work and the work of Project Cold Case is so important.
All right. Thanks for joining us today. A little technical difficulties there, but we're not professionals. But I'm Ryan Backmann, founder and executive director of Project Cold Case. Joining me today is Clay County Sheriff's Office Cold Case Detective Rob Schoonover. Thanks for being here, Rob.
Certainly. Thanks for having me.
We've been doing these now for a couple of months, and we've had a wide range of guests, but suspiciously missing has been an actual detective, somebody that has worked these cold cases, done the investigations, spent years doing it. A little bit of background with you. You were retired JSO after 30 years. You were a lieutenant, the unit commander for the homicide department. Those were the hot teams, the cold case teams. Right. You retired and then joined the Clay County Sheriff's Office at a position that they had never had a specific cold case detective position in there.
Right.
But with your experience and Sheriff Darrell Daniels, his knowledge of law enforcement, he saw a need there and he created that position and brought you on. Why don't you give us a little history there of Rob Schoonover and your background?
Sure. Yeah, I did 33 years with Jacksonville, and I was lucky to go through a lot of departments and divisions in my career. And but I look back at my 3 years in homicide, where I supervised over 35 individual supervisors and officers, and it was I would say that was a highlight of my career, being in there. We probably had over 300 murders in those 3 years.
Wow. Yeah.
But to see the guys and girls go out and work those cases, and our solvability rate also was high back then. It was above the national average.
Yeah.
And so it was gratifying, and I really liked it. So when Sheriff Daniels took office in Clay County, I approached him for a position, and originally started just doing human resources backgrounds. And then he came up with the idea of, there's 4 cold cases in Clay County, and never has there been someone dedicated to working that case. That was always like, okay, you got time, look at this. You can't do a case like that. No. It has to be a dedicated person to sit down and look through all the material that goes into it. And so it's all because of Sheriff Daniels that this position was created, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to work this position.
Yeah, and he, obviously, for him to recognize that for us as a nonprofit organization that's constantly dealing with law enforcement and communicating with law enforcement, most of which don't have a dedicated unit or a dedicated detective, and it's real easy to see. If you're just asking homicide detectives to, in their free time, pull an old case and take a look at it, it just doesn't get the attention it deserves. You and I have known each other for a number of years now. When you were the lieutenant over there, our paths would cross when I was at another organization, and I always leaned on you when there were questions and family was calling. Trying to figure out who was the detective on the case, see if there was any new information, and so that was kind of how our relationship started here. And then when you took over or when you started in Clay County, we had, a couple of those cases that you mentioned, the 4 that you had. And I knew from talking with families, some of those families, that there was some frustration that in the turnover, the detective turnover, they would feel like they had just gotten to know the detective that was looking in on the case, and then something would come up and they wouldn't be able to continue looking at it, or they would promote, or whatever the natural progression was. And I came out there and had lunch with you and toured your office and toured your vault and saw the boxes and boxes and boxes in those cases.
Yeah.
Which is, I'm hearing a story from a family member sometimes, and I try to keep everything in perspective, and I know there's always two sides to a story, but smaller agencies that don't have a lot of cold cases, that didn't have a dedicated unit, you do wonder, are these did these cases get the attention they deserved? And then you walk into that room and you see a bunch of bankers boxes full of files and reports and information, and you go, oh, well, that's a relief. You know that the case wasn't forgotten, the victim wasn't forgotten, that people were were investigating it as to the best they could then. And since you've taken over, you've done three of those four cases you've spotlighted on First Coast News with Katie Jeffries and her Unsolved series. One of those is the Terrell Orcutt case, which we got a little clip of that. We didn't show the whole video, but there's those bins I'm talking about that are just full of.
When I went into that position and they told me, all right, all the case files are in this one room. And when I opened the door, I was overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I mean, because there was 4 cases, so you think there's not going to be that much material, but there was a lot. And it wasn't organized, and not blaming anyone in the past, but, as people worked on it, they put stuff in there, and then, it just wasn't an organized. So that was the first thing I had to do, was organize all the files. And then I wanted to start from the latest cold case, which was the Orcutt.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember, talking to you and kind of that same thing. You were saying, well, when I first got here and I grabbed that Orcutt, I don't know anything about this case, and now I've got to go through all of these files and familiarize myself with it. And sometimes we think that that a case may or that it's going to move a lot faster than it really is, and it just. It doesn't.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
There's a lot that goes into it. You're creating a new position. There's some administrative things that are going on with that as well. But you have to familiarize yourself with. I mean, how many detectives have their hands on that case over the years? There was the original investigators. Somebody picked it up here, there, along the way.
Yeah, I would probably say there are 10 to 12 have looked at that case through since 1990, and it's just some made some progress and headway, but like I said, there wasn't a dedicated person to spend the time, and this is basically what has turned out to be a good project, and I'm looking forward, like I said, to keep working on it.
Yeah. Terrell Orcutt's family has been very involved. They're vocal. I know it may have been before you got there, but I know that her sister went into the Clay County Sheriff's Office one time and sat down and refused to leave until she got to talk to the sheriff. Yeah. That is not always going to work. I don't even know if it worked then, if she was able to get a meeting with them, but you know the frustration. You've done this for a long time. You understand that these families. You are their hope, and I mean, sometimes their last hope is resting on your shoulders. Of course, you're going to do everything you can, but it doesn't always happen as fast as we want. No. But you've gotten into that case a little bit. You did the segment with Katie on First Coast News. Is that still progressing? You're still moving forward with that case?
Yes, and with new technology now, DNA, there's a lot of things that could be tested now that maybe wasn't tested back then, and we're in the process of doing that. One of the things, too, that I met with the Orcutt sisters, or talked to Cheryl and Merrill, and keeping them abreast of what's going on, I think has eased their minds a little bit, keeping them involved. And I've done that with the other cases, too. I've reached out and I found the next of kin. So, they know that it's just not a forgotten.
Sure. And I think, that's a good segue to kind of let families know that make sure that if you move or you get a new phone to contact the investigating agency on your loved one's case and make sure that they always have your up-to-date contact information, because I know we've had situations in the past where we've tried to reach out to families that we used to talk to regularly, with you coming in, and not having those contacts. I know there was at least one case where there was just no contact information for next of kin.
Right.
That's not uncommon, for you guys. So I always like to encourage families, to whether it's annually or just if you change your phone number or anything, to just make sure that the detectives know how to get in touch with you. I mean, believe me, these guys want to come to your door one day and tell you they've made an arrest in your loved one's case.
Yeah.
They want to be able to find you when that day comes. Cheryl, she comes to a lot of our events. We've maintained a good relationship with her and in person. And then Meryl lives out west coast of the United States, and so we've never met with her, but we've had a number of conversations with her as well.
Right.
They have always fought for justice for their sister. They've got a Facebook page up. They've been very active and involved in their loved one's case, and I think now that you have that dedicated spot at the Clay County Sheriff's Office, there is a lot of relief there with the family. I mean, they feel like you're very open with them. They've got your contact information. They can reach out to you at any time, and you will respond. And I think that's alleviated some of the burden that they were feeling before, where if it's a detective that is doing it in their free time, they just don't have a lot of information at regular intervals.
And it's tough to, say I'm going to work on this for even just a day, say I'm going to devote my time, but it's got to be a dedicated full-time position. And because every day, you think of cold cases that the person is actually not doing something.
Yeah.
But you are, whether you're going back and looking through those files that are boxes and boxes, you're pulling out information, you're double checking. I could tell you with the Orcutt case that I have reached out to probably 10 or 12 individuals that back in 1990 were on a list of possible persons of interest, I'll say.
People you needed to speak with.
Yeah. So, and what I started doing since the last person that worked on the case was just obtaining DNA swabs and then send them into FDLE to get compared to what we had. And
that's not a quick process either.
No.
A lot of times it's a hurry up and wait. You go out there and get that swab, you send it in, and now you're at the mercy of the lab's workload.
and it's not FDLE's fault.
No.
It's just that there's so much that's being submitted through FDLE that it does bog down the system. And on that case, though, I could tell you that Marcy Scott has reached out to me from FDLE and said that they're moving forward on those DNA swabs that I submitted, so we should hear something back there. I will say this: Merrill had sent me a video link of a case that occurred in 1990 in Georgia, and the similarities were unreal. That in Georgia, this case was Terrell's case was in January of 90. This girl was May of 90, and only 2 hours from here outside of where we are in Georgia. And the car was found on the side of the road, running, lights on, door open. Her purse was on the seat.
Oh gosh, that's
exactly
scary,
the scenario with Terrell. And they found her 13 days later, murdered. Well, I didn't know that case existed.
Yeah.
After contacting the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, they didn't know
the Terrell's
case. So right now, we're in the process of working together with a private lab company in South Florida to see if we can match up and see if those cases are connected. You want to rule that out first of all.
Of course.
So that's interesting.
This is, it's great to hear that, because I know there's families out there that, they do find information sometimes, and sometimes it's valuable. A lot of times people talk and people insert themselves and want to get involved, but with Meryl and Cheryl running that Facebook page, and and I don't know how she came across that.
Just
that case.
I think it was somebody else had told her something about a case in Georgia, and she did the research and found it and sent it to me. And like I said, it's things like that.
Yeah,
that maybe
nothing, but it
could be
certainly something to look at. It would be in such close proximity, same year, and such similarities. I mean, that Orcutt case, you basically just described it. Her car is found running on the side of the road, lights on, passenger door open, right? And it was left overnight, right? It was
5 a.m. is when they found the car.
And then a few days later, a week later, they find her remains. How far from the car?
Like 4 miles.
Yeah,
And it was in deep. Back in 1990, Middleburg was more. It wasn't as built up as it is today. So you can imagine that, and that's one of the things I say, that the person who was involved in this crime, for them to abduct her on State Road 218 and then 4 miles later dumped her body a week later. They had to know that area.
Yeah.
It's not somebody.
You don't just find yourself there if you're driving through, on the interstates or through Florida. Yeah. Well, gosh, you have to keep us updated on how that's going and where that leads. And we're grateful for your hard work and dedication to that case, as well as the others. Let's talk about the other two that you have put on there, just so we can get the information out there, and we'll post the links to those stories that Katie Jeffries did. We'll post those in the comments later on, so that if anybody hadn't seen them, they can go back and watch them. But the second case you did was a young girl.
Yes, this was a 2001 14-year-old Jennifer Metternach was out on 103rd Street in Jacksonville, and we believe that she was willingly got into a vehicle with our suspect, and they found her body the next morning off of State Road 217 in a creek. And the only evidence that we had was a brass knife handle that was underneath her body in the creek.
Wow.
So with new technology, we are utilizing. We're sending that off to be retested. And hopefully we can come up with something, whether it's DNA or even fingerprints. You find out this technology, it's amazing, but we just were made aware of this. Pinellas County Sheriff's Office has the vacuum metal disposition. It looks like a microwave.
Right.
You put the objects in it, and what it does, the chemicals and whatever they have in there, it draws out, and it'll produce. You could see a print evolve, or even the DNA that they can swab from the item. So, it's just amazing technology. So that case, we're hoping that we'll have some good results on that also.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it in the past that taking old cases, bringing old cases up to current investigative standards is a whole new, you're not going to solve every one of these right away.
Right.
You're not going to solve every one of them, unfortunately. But with technology advancing the way it is, it's a task just to bring these older cases up to today's standards. And it's also why it's important for agencies to be trying to do that along the way, so that when technology has a big change, you're not going back to a case that hadn't been looked at in 20 years or 30 years. You're hopefully only going back, a handful of years, and being able to say, well, 5 years ago we did this, and this. So we know it's not any of that stuff. Is there any technology advancements that can do anything for us now? The cases that you're describing, obviously you've been at Clay County Sheriff's Office for 2 years now, and you said you've got 4 cases, but you've been moving heavy on all 4 of them. You've done 3 different spotlights on them. Right. You're chasing down swabs and Orcutt, new technology and Metternach here.
I could tell you in the I've been to Oklahoma. I've been to West Virginia. I've been to North Carolina, South Carolina, following up leads. And, but it takes the support behind me, which, again, is my sheriff and undersheriff. They give me the leadway to, if I see something that I need to do, they are very supportive of being on board and going and, exhausting all leads.
Your sheriff, Sheriff Daniels. I mean, he has he's made quite a name for himself. He was a retired Jacksonville guy.
Yes,
and he won the election out there in Clay County. And I mean, you see this around the state and around the country with not all sheriffs, but just a handful of sheriffs that really kind of embrace social media, technology, kind of transparency, showing the community what they're doing as it happens, and he took on a challenge of trying to his coffee cup, putting people on notice in Clay County that if you're going to break the law and if you're going to hurt our citizens, that he's coming for you.
I don't know what the official approval rating is of his, but I could tell you it is very high.
Yeah,
probably one of the highest of any sheriff. He has just he's won those people over. I mean, at first I think there was some strife or struggles that people who didn't that wasn't their pick.
But
I think he's turned them around. And they've become believers.
I think you'd be hard pressed to find too many people in Clay County that don't like what he's been able to do, and his commitment to the community.
Yes,
I mean, because that's basically what it is. He said, I'm not going to just be a face on a website that nobody ever sees, or
No, he's out there.
He is out there in the public. I think it's a mutual admiration too with the community now. When he goes out there, people want to come up and talk to him. They want to thank him. And like I said, for us, when it comes to cold cases, that's a constant struggle with agencies to assign the resources necessary and the commitment. In Jacksonville, we're such a big city. There's so many cases. It's really hard to be out in front of that. They do have a dedicated cold case unit though that works very hard on the cases. But around the state, we see agencies that don't have dedication to that. And you and I were talking before we started today and went live about just you being able to say, hey, there's a training, there's a conference, there's new technology, and the support over at Clay County saying, well, go find out about it. Go do it and report back to us, and let's see if that's going to help us and help our community. I mean, you really can't say enough about that kind of commitment to the cases and victims. And
I don't want to get you off track, but this morning I attended a 2-hour course at IPTM, and it involved genealogy, and that is the next big thing that's coming. I mean, the technology that they can research and find, it's just amazing. I sat in class this morning, and you're like, wow, and it's come a long way.
I sat through one of those recently too. I thought my head was going to explode at the end of the training, and as it got to kind of process the information and really understand it a little bit better and do some review of it and some more research on it, it's nothing short of amazing. I mean, if you're a bad guy out there, you should be really concerned about genealogy. It's taken DNA, which was a game changer for criminal investigations. It's taking that to a whole new level. The ability to be able to connect an unknown suspect with a known third or fourth cousin, which is, I think, fourth cousin, it means if you and I were fourth cousins, we would share the same great grandparents.
Right.
And there may be 400 plus
below that.
People, in between that and us. And they're able to take that technology and through some some somewhat mind-numbing, if you don't know what you're doing, research.
And the main thing with that is that you got to have DNA.
Yeah.
So in some of the cases, we don't have DNA, but we're looking, and the Orcutt case might be a one that we go forward in that direction. If we can come up with a profile.
Yeah.
Which right now we don't have.
Yeah.
But that is something that if we can, then we could go that route to the genealogy. And so, that case is almost 30 years old, but yet technology is keeping us in the loop, to work on it.
It's got to be kind of exhilarating to have a new avenue, or potentially a new avenue, with technology changing. And, I'm sure just in all your years of experience, there were times where you had to sit down with families and literally say, we have done everything we can. Right. And we're not able to solve this case, and we're but now when technology improves like that, there's always hope, because that next step in technology could be the thing that separates an unsolved case from a solved case. And again, it's true. I mean, I also say there's a very fine line between hope and false hope. And, before families get too excited about genealogy, there's definitely some things you got to understand about whether that case is a viable case for genealogy. If it doesn't have DNA, that's it. That avenue is closed to you. But even still, some families, when DNA technology is not where it was now, they had to use a lot more of the samples, blood, semen, hair, to get a profile. And so sometimes, there's not any DNA left, to do.
Over the years, you exhaust what you had, and, now you're almost back to square one.
Right. So, it's great for families and see this stuff to kind of follow up, but don't get your hopes up without knowing. It's also very expensive technology right now because it's so new. We know a couple of labs. We have contacts with a couple of labs. Parabon, which is probably the most well-known up in Virginia. They've been doing it for a while now, and I think they've solved or helped solve somewhere around 50 cases, sexual assaults and homicides through genetic genealogy. But DNA Labs International down in Deerfield Beach has started a program. FDLE is doing some things with it. Identifinders out in California. There's a number of, it's starting to catch on, and people are starting to realize that we can clear a lot of old cases that have DNA with this technology, and what a great way to bring a lot of cases up to current investigative standards by using genealogy. As it progresses, I think it'll be cheaper, more affordable, more options to use it. Some state labs using it, that kind of stuff will help. But there's always, I like to give everybody all the information. It can be a very expensive undertaking. You have to do a different type of extract on the DNA than you submit to CODIS, which is the FBI database of DNA. It's not the same as CODIS. That genetic genealogy doesn't read the same DNA, so you have to have a new extract of DNA that's used with different software to provide the data that they use to compare it. So it's complicated stuff, and there's a lot of people out there a lot smarter than me that know what they're doing, and so we thank them for their commitment. The third case you did was a double homicide out in Clay County.
That was 2007. Chelsea Roan and Matt Brumbaugh, they were roommates, and basically were executed in the home. There was some things taken from the house, the safe. They were involved in illegal activity such as selling drugs. But again, I said before, nobody deserves to die like that. They were executed, and but that case too, we're in the middle of processing some evidence again through latest technology.
Yeah.
And we're hoping that we'll get some positive results on that one also.
Yeah. When you did those unsolved segments, did you find them beneficial? I mean, did anything, we've had a few that have gotten Crime Stopper tips that we've done, in the past, but, without obviously, I don't want you to say, and I know you're still in, these are open investigations, but my question really is, did you find it beneficial?
Yes. Yes. I'll tell you, I've got phone calls on all three of those cases when Katie Jeffries did those segments.
Yeah.
And a shout out goes to her and First Coast News.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a good way of getting that out there. I think a lot of people have forgot. I mean,
Yeah. People have forgotten, and we talk about relationship changes being, genetic genealogy may change this, but from our understanding and research we've done, changes in relationships are typically the way most cold cases are solved.
Yeah.
Because somebody now is not in a relationship with an abusive boyfriend or spouse. They don't have addiction. Yeah. They don't live that kind of lifestyle anymore. They live in a different place and they're not scared anymore. And they're willing to change, or they're willing to come forward with information they've always had,
right,
but weren't always willing to share. And so when we share these cases, there might be somebody out there that had information that forgot that they needed to come forward with it. And this is a reminder that there's still families out there, searching for answers. And, what we always say too is that it's a public safety issue, because now you've got these bad guys are potentially still out there.
Yeah. It could be your neighbor, your work coworker, or,
Yeah. I always think about, them being, living next door to my child's bus stop. That's the one that I always think about, and I go, do you really want somebody that was able to do these things to a 14-year-old girl, a young woman, and Terrell Orcutt, this, Chelsea Roan was young too.
She was 16.
16, yeah.
16.
So, you want those people living in your neighborhood, you know what I mean? Next door to your child's bus stop. It really is the reason why people that haven't been personally affected or touched by these cases still should care and hope that they're resolved. Like you said, there was some illegal activity in that case, and that doesn't justify murder,
right?
And you still, so now you've got these people, the person or people that executed these two individuals still out there, so it's an important thing. I think back to you might remember this case. Annalisa Gobatin was driving down Blanding Boulevard. She was a nurse. She was driving to her children's school.
Two drug dealers had a
shootout down a side road, struck her.
The bullet came from several hundred yards away and just
struck her in the head as she was driving. I mean, literally, if she had stopped to tie her shoe, if she had tripped going to her car, if she had needed gas, she might be here. But that's the alternative when these people go free, is now they get into a shootout in some neighborhood and some innocent person's driving down the street. She left behind 3 kids, a husband, young children too. I keep in touch with that family to some degree on Facebook, and we were close for a long time, and that case was solved, but tragic. And I will say that, from what I've seen and heard, the kids are as well adjusted and have done as well as could possibly happen. But that was just a horrible case, and I always think about that when people question why it's important to raise awareness for these cases and to dedicate resources to cold case detectives and technology, is that could be the alternative.
And what I say on those segments with Katie, the last thing I always end it with is, somebody knows something. A person does not commit a murder and not tell someone.
Right.
I mean, if it happens, it's rare. It's rare. Someone always has to tell somebody. And I'll be honest, I watched, there was a segment last night on 2020 where this University of Kentucky football player back in 1992 was shot on the front step of his house where he was living on campus. And it turned out that it took, like you said, a girlfriend and a boyfriend were talking one night several years later, and he admitted to her that he had done this. And then she didn't say anything for another 4 years.
Yeah.
And then finally, she thought hard about it and said, this isn't right, brought that information forward, and, they made an arrest. And I think he's waiting on trial, or he's got a retrial or something. But, I mean, that's what it is, and people, sometimes they think, the information I have is no good.
Right.
And it can only be that little tiny bit that we need to move forward.
One of the kind of tenets of investigation is you can't reveal everything. You never reveal everything. That can be frustrating for families, but there's a reason behind that, because if somebody comes forward with information, you've got to have some way of vetting that it's legitimate information. And in that situation, if everything had been laid out on the table, you know what I mean, and somebody comes forward, it's hard to know whether they actually had that information from their own knowledge, from a direct conversation, or whether they read it in a newspaper story. And look, I love having as much information as possible, but that is the reason behind holding some of that information close to the vest. You got to be able to vet it.
Yeah.
The Jacksonville Sheriff's Office had a guy walk into the police memorial building on a Friday night a couple weeks ago and just confess to like a 17-year-old murder, and just out of the blue. And
that doesn't happen very
that
often.
does not happen very often. And but they still, and you can imagine being the detectives on that. All right, give us a little, like what's going on here? I mean, it's horrible to say, but there have been many false confessions.
Right.
There's been stories about people that needed health care, and needed somebody to take care of them. Yeah, get in the system and get fed in a bed and you get their medical, taken care of. So they still had to vet this person's information. Believe it or not, that literally comes in and says, I did this. Yeah. And, at least to our knowledge, he checked all the boxes that allowed them, to be able to move forward and make an arrest in that case. Those are rare, but it is also why we tell families not to give up hope, because, if somebody can just walk in and confess after 17 years, then anything's possible.
It's true.
I mean, technology is a wonderful thing, but for most of our families, I mean, even we're talking about cold cases. You go back to 1990 with Orcutt case, but in the 80s and 70s, evidence just wasn't even collected the way that it was, because DNA was not known to have any be anything.
They took photographs, fingerprints, and that was basically it.
That's it. Yeah. So unfortunately, there are cases out there, that are older that won't be viable for genealogy, just because the even collecting DNA evidence wasn't a process and policy and procedure that they used back then. So we're always going to rely on community connections and partnerships and the support of the community. Do you guys, is it First Coast Crime Stoppers that does tips, or is there another one? Because I know like St. Johns County, it's like Northeast Florida.
Yeah, no, it's First Coast Crime Stoppers, and you can remain anonymous, and also possibility of receiving an award if an arrest is made. So, like I said, some people are sitting there right now. They know something from past crimes. Your conscience just has to take over, and you need to come forward. And
we. I'm pretty sure the number is 866-845-TIPS is Crime Stoppers.
Yeah, I think 845-8633.
Yeah. And we we talk about that, and I need to get somebody from over there. I need to get Wiley over here to 866-845-8477, which spells tips.
Yeah.
And you can remain anonymous and be eligible for up to a $3,000 reward. Sometimes those anonymous tips are helpful, but with it being anonymous, it sometimes can keep you from making the arrest.
It makes it a little more difficult, but gladly take that information.
Yeah, take that information. But hey, look, if you're willing to come forward, any way you're willing to come forward can be helpful. And what's your office number? I'll put you on the spot there for
mine is 904-213-6703, and that's a direct line to my office.
All right, good. I hope you won't be getting calls from people all over the country, but if somebody's willing to come forward with information, we want them to know how to get that information to you. We have had stories in the past at the last Cold Case Advisory Commission meeting. They were giving us a case review, and they said that 10 years after the incident, they put a story in the newspaper, and a guy called up and he said, I watched these people dump a body out of a trunk of a car on that bridge, and I called and I told dispatch or operator who told somebody what I saw. And that information never made it to the investigators. And he said, I just assumed for 10 years that case was solved.
Yeah.
Because I thought, well, if they needed, me, they would have contacted me. I did call them. Yeah. So it is good to have a line of communication that makes sure that the information is getting to the right spot. I mean, that was a very old case. So, again, policies and procedures and things are a lot better now. But we have... And you probably even more so. I've heard it all. You've probably seen a lot of that in your career.
Yeah, there's, a lot of times things slip through the cracks, not intentionally.
Sure.
It does happen, and unfortunately, but like I said, we're moving forward. New technology. Hopefully, we can put down some of these cold cases.
Yeah. What's the just a real quick the fourth case that you guys have over there?
This occurred in 2009. Mark Gregg was the victim, and he was in his home. Apparently, someone came inside, shot him repeatedly with a shotgun, and fled. There was no evidence. Nothing at the scene that was to process.
Yeah.
But again, there's some questions on persons of interest in that case also.
Yeah.
I just at this point I have not had time to delve into that one, and but my understanding is that there's persons of interest in that one too.
Yeah. Good. Well, Rob, appreciate you coming in and joining us today. Great information. And of course, if anybody has information on any of those cases we talked about, Terrell Urquhart, Jennifer Metternach, Matt Brumbaugh, and Chelsea Roan, and then Mark Gregg, the last one you just mentioned. Call Crime Stoppers, call the Clay County Sheriff's Office, ask for Detective Schoonover. If you call over there, I know you'll be happy to listen to what they have to say.
Certainly.
We're excited about your position over there. We're appreciative that Sheriff Daniels has created that and given you some flexibility and some freedom to travel and investigate. One of the worst things, we actually started raising money for a cold case resource fund because we were talking to other smaller agencies that were saying, my suspect is in Nebraska and I don't have a budget to travel to interview him.
Right.
And we're going, and we talked about a lot of them today. There's a lot of reasons why a case can stay cold.
Yeah.
But funding shouldn't be one of them, So we're super appreciative of Sheriff Daniels and Clay County Sheriff's Office for giving you some freedom to go out there and try to solve these. And it sounds like your plate's full with just the ones you have gotten into, and so we're excited to see where that leads, and hopefully when you're slapping some cuffs on somebody, then you'll come back in and tell us all the...
We could do another segment.
Yeah.
But, and kudos to you and your staff. Project Cold Case is, I think, a great organization for the victims' families. basically to have contact with, and you kind of are the liaison between the sheriff's office. At least in my case, you are. You know. And,
we want to be that. You know, we want to help, and to any investigators that are out there watching, you know, refer us, call us, you know, and refer families to us, especially when they call up upset. You know what I mean? I've lived this. Patty Lord, our lead advocate in here, her daughter was murdered almost 15 years ago in Virginia. It's unsolved. You know, we can speak from a place of understanding. Right. You know, not every case is different, but we have experience. We've had that knock on the door. We've had those conversations. We're still awaiting justice, and so you know, it's a lot easier for us to be that shoulder to cry on, and our goal is to free the investigators up to do what they do. You know, and investigate these cases and hopefully resolve them. And we think that partnership works well together. So we're going to continue to do it, and we appreciate it when it's recognized and when an investigator can see the value of our organization and how we can help. You know, anytime we deal with Katie, First Coast News, and Lorena at Action News, we would gladly deal with News for Jacks. Anybody that wants to raise awareness for cold cases, we've got plenty of them, and we're always looking for a partner out there in the media to help share them. And we share those cases when the media does them. We do our own spotlights on them. Orcutt case is one that we spotlighted. It was one of, you know, I'll say the first dozen or so cases that were submitted to us when we started the organization. Right. And so that's one of the oldest ones that we've done a spotlight on, and we've kind of kept up with and followed along and tried to help those families, the Orcutt family, with their journey and deal with that grief and the frustration that goes along with it. So with that being said, we're going to sign off this week and maybe go get some lunch and see what else we can come up with, other ways we can come up with to help people out. Thanks again, Rob, for coming out here and spending some time with us.
Certainly, anytime.
All right. Well, we'll definitely have you back when that first arrest happens. We're going to have you back. So, all right. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back next week with another Facebook Live.